Good evening. Good evening. I'm Cynthia Hoven, and this is our work on studies in anthroposophy. This 7-part series is a study that we're calling Our Human Future, creating or building a new universe of love. Love, which is the future of human beings, our mandate, our possibility, our charge out of the freedom that we live in, that was granted to us as human beings. How do we transform that into love? This is the 3rd series. And prior to this 7-part series, we did a series on cosmic and human evolution. That was the 2nd time that I offered that series. And if you haven't studied the book, An Outline of Esoteric Science by Rudolf Steiner, or if you haven't participated in one of those series, either the one I just gave or the one before it, I urgently suggest that you do that so that you know what foundation we're building on as we create visions of what's ahead of the human race. This evening, we're going to take a deep dive and really confront the questions of artificial intelligence, the questions that really call into exploration. What does it mean to be a human being in this age, different from what it was many ages ago as pastoralists, as hunters and gatherers, as shepherds, as priests and shamans and whatever? What does it mean to create a worthy life in this rapidly changing technological world? I'm inserting this already now into the 3rd of these 7 lessons because it will shine a special light on what we're going to look at in the coming episodes. Dear friends, this is still only 2 weeks after Easter, which we, students of esoteric Christianity, are always striving to understand better and deeper and wider. What could it possibly mean that God incarnated into a human form, went through a human biography for 3 years, not 33, but from the time of the baptism until the crucifixion, and then overcame death? What does it mean to overcome death? Huge question, and hugely relevant for this time that we're living in, when we're dealing with the forces of technology, when so much is dying into materialistic intelligence. So we'll keep going. Last week, we ended with a consideration of the introduction to the Gospel of St. John, these beautiful and highly esoteric words that identify the Creator God, Christ, as the so-called Logos. The Logos is the meaning bearer, the utterances, the creative impulses that flow out of conscious beings. Your word goes forth from your own mouth and shares your essence when you're really speaking consciously, shares your essence with the world. So also the old students of mystical Christianity sought to understand how all of the world was created through the word of the Creator. And indeed, this was not unique to Christianity. We find these traditions speaking of the world being created through the word in the ancient times of even the Aborigines, the times of the Norse myths, so many cultures spoke of the world being spoken into being. And even some of you know that beloved fantasy children's story, The Tales of Narnia, speak of how Aslan, a lion who was a kind of mythological representative of Christ, how he created the entire world by singing it into existence. So I'd like you to enliven that thought in your hearts. What can it mean to create a world in speaking? And this is going to have a lot to do with what we will bring up soon, talking about technology, artificial intelligence, chat GPT, and so on. What is the sacred word? And I want to continue because in the Gospel of St. John, the words continue like this. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He, the Word, he was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was nothing made that was made. In him was life, and life was the light of the human being. And then there are a few more short verses inserted. And then comes the sentence about the incarnation of Christ, which says, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, full of grace and truth. And it goes on, but I want to begin this lesson with a little bit of eurythmy as we ended our last lesson. And this is even a nod to one of our participants who wrote me a little note and said, I want to do eurythmy in these classes. You're a eurythmist. Why aren't you bringing it? So yes, here we are. And I want to begin by teaching you the word beginning. And we did this last week, but it's a beautiful word. In eurythmy, beginner's level eurythmy, we choose the dominant sounds in a word. The dominant sounds in the word beginning are b and g in English. German also, they have the same word for in the beginning. And I am sure that about half of you know eurythmy, and maybe the other half have never done it. But in eurythmy, we move sounds, moving with our arms, what we do in speech with our mouth. So the sound B reminds us of the uncreated world. Imagine Creator God enfolded as in an egg. This is the sound B. And the shape that I'm making corresponds to what I do with my mouth when I say, in the beginning. But we can go further because the word beginning has a second dominant sound, and that is the G. And we can look at that G as where God opens his or her, its heart, and lets all of the dreams and the impulses and the logos energy and the creation pour forth. And that first world was all word. And so this looks like this. In the be, now we open, turn your hands around, and open your doors as if God in the beginning. And at this moment, you should feel energy flows forth from your heart, energy sufficient to create everything that comes afterwards, including you and me, all humanity, the whole earth, our whole solar system, all the beings who live flow forth from God's heart. Ancient mystery wisdom. Let's do again, beginning in the be. Turn your hands, open your heart. Beginning. A little more word of explanation. The G has tension in the upper arms. So when you open, it's not simply opening, you push the walls of your egg, the doors of your heart open. Again, here you rest in your inner world, in the beginning. And now I will teach you a gesture for the word word. And I want to use the vowel which is in that, which is the same that we use in English for the word word, world, earth, and other things. And this is, let me show you the prelude to that. An O is this, where you hold a closed circle, and the is when you make an open circle, and everything that was inside of the Creator's mind is now outside. Try that with me. In the beginning was the Word. And you must imagine from your arms, from your heart, everything that you had inside is now streaming out with vitality. Again, in the beginning was the Word. We'll keep going just a little bit. And the Word was with, now let's do another God. And a God was the Word. This was in the beginning with God. So I offer that to you tonight for our little eurythmy beginning. And in future weeks, we'll go a little bit further with it. And I want to show you why here. Because this small meditation goes on to say, in the Word was life. In the beginning was the Word. And this corresponds to what we have been learning as ancient Saturn, the first stage of creation when all was warmth, but nothing was alive. And the Word, in the Word was life, which is, if you remember the condition of ancient Sun, all of the warmth of ancient Saturn becomes a living universe. No dark, no evil, no hindrances. Life like a spring day full of resurrection forces. In the Word was life, and life was the light of human beings. And this is an ancient moon. And then quite a few verses later, the author, the writer of this gospel, the Gospel of John, writes, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And this is the heart of esoteric Christianity, that this Word was present at every step and became one with human beings. As I said, we'll do this next week, a little bit more in eurythmy. As I said, if you haven't done the other lectures, you won't have a context for that yet. So please go back and look at this work that we've done before. And for those of you who want to go straight to another book about it, this is a lecture series that Rudolf Steiner gave called The Lectures on the Gospel of St. John, in which he goes in detail into all of this. So we're going to put that aside, but not too far away, because this provides the backbone for what we're doing when we talk about the age of technology that we live in now. Because through our mechanical, technological world, we are imposing our human will on the word. And in imposing our word on it, we are also, in many cases, killing it through our violence, through our lies, through our deception. The word should have goodness permeating it. We have essentially watched as the word fell away from the Creator. The question is, can we rediscover the word and become, even as it says in this book, become servants of the word? So with that as our introduction, let's start opening the door here. We are living in a time of incredible danger and incredible possibilities, astonishing. We could say we're living at the triumph created by what we do with the natural sciences. And Rudolf Steiner and I would never want to disparage the natural sciences, but they have their limitations. And as we've looked at in previous talks, when we use the natural sciences, we are employing a method which is appropriate for looking at things that are in the physical world. But to understand things that are in the etheric world, in the world of life, we need to use a different kind of science, a science of living thinking, which is essential for understanding the mystery of the resurrection, as I mentioned not long ago, the mystery of life, the mystery of transformation, looking for Christ in the etheric world. All of this is a level higher and more subtle than the natural sciences. But the natural sciences are valid and accurate, and they've made so much possible for us. So consider how much has changed since we were children. How many of you have had cataract surgery? That wasn't possible some decades ago, and so efficient, so effective. How many have had arthroscopic surgery, the surgery in which tiny microscopes are fed into minuscule holes in your skin with which they can do appendectomies and shoulder surgeries for me and so many things, medical emergencies? How many have had knee replacements, hip replacements? So much is possible through the miracles of medical science. Considered on its surface, it's nothing less than miraculous. What else has changed? We can look at our lifestyles. In our age, at least in our culture, almost everyone who needs one owns a personal car, unless you live in San Francisco or New York, in which case you might willingly forego it. We can travel around the world. It's increasingly easy. It has become increasingly easy to fly to far distant places in airplanes. Wasn't always that way. Pollutes our environment a lot, but we do miraculous things with it. We also send spacecraft into outer space. send people to the moon. And closer to home, much has also changed. We all have, at least in the modern world, we have sewage, we have heat and light in our homes. We have high degrees of comfort. Even more powerful in our time, getting closer to our topic, more present is the omnipresence of the computer world. When did you first buy your first home computer? I bought mine, I believe, in the year 2000, but I was already doing computers in the 1960s, but I didn't want it in my home. Of course I have it now. When did you get your first mobile phone? Your first smartphone instead of the flip phone? And it said that each smartphone, perhaps you've heard that, each smartphone carries more intelligence in it than the computers that operated the first spaceship to the moon. What is that, huh? And all this is going to continue to increase exponentially into the future. We know that. And if we're not kind of concerned, we're not paying attention. We all know Amazon now runs things with drone delivery services. Drones are able to spy, drones are able to do surveillance. And I'm quite aware, because of my travels, of what artificial technology can do with citizen surveillance in China, for instance, where you will be watched wherever you walk on the streets by a series of cameras that watch you. I don't know what, every 20 feet, every 50 feet. You cannot hide on the streets of Shanghai. They will find you. And we have facial recognition, of course, for that. And we know that facial recognition makes a lot of mistakes, so that this is all problem. And all of this comes, as we know, at a price, the price of the resources of the earth, and what we're doing as we mine the raw metals and so on, the rare earths. So all this that has been promised to humanity in the form of modern technology and comfort will continue to permeate all aspects of our life into the future, even though we are simultaneously ravaging our earth and all of our resources. And what are we doing? We are remaking the world in our own image. And if I'm inviting you to listen in on this webinar about our human future and making a new universe of love, is that what we're doing? These seeds are not yet loving. Although they serve to make life a lot more comfortable, they also make us a bit asleep. And in many ways, perhaps you've noticed that, technology replaces the clairvoyance that we have lost. Think already back to the telephone, in which perhaps an ancient consciousness would have used, you see what I did, an old-fashioned telephone? Ancient consciousness would perhaps have still been able to communicate with distant people through clairvoyance or clairaudience. You would know what someone else needed. That's not even common to think of that anymore. We want to just have a quick access to people. And how much have we done? How much of your memory have you given to your computer, to your smartphone? I and those of you who are in my age group, we remember being able to recall at least 100 phone calls of our friends and offices and so on in our minds, just had a prodigious memory. Now we look it up, and how easily, as we all know, how easily we're content just with the pre-processed information that searches give us. What we're doing through these computers, we are imposing onto the natural world our most innate, our most intimate human gift or capacity, the capacity to think. Consider that. We have now learned to understand the processes of logic that a human being has. And by exploring that and working with it, we're creating machines that imitate our processes of thinking. They can do logic, they can send machines to the moon, and so on and so on. They can calculate enormous number of things. We are shaping the synthetic world according to the images that we're exploring on the frontiers of our minds. And yes, we human beings have been given the gift of life, the gift of freedom, and we have the freedom to make the world like this, however we want, to make the world in our own image. But we have failed to notice that what we are doing, what we are playing with, is the world that has been, I'll pull in a word that those of you who've been listening to me for quite a while know. This world has been long ago conquered by Ahriman. Ahriman, the spirit of materialization. All of these wonderful accomplishments are being carried out in the kingdom of death, not the kingdom of sacred life, not the kingdom that overcomes death, not the kingdom of resurrection, but we're playing on the board in the kingdom of death, using our intellectual thinking, our what we call the dead thinking. But there is, in fact, another kingdom. This is a profound little segue that we're doing here. Another kingdom that is living inside this kingdom of death. And this is the spiritual world. If you are a dead-on committed materialist, you're not looking for the spiritual world and you're safe in denying it. But for those who have a real conviction and a dawning experience of the spiritual world, the world of beings, the world of life and qualities, we know that there's a different kind of existence that lives right inside this kingdom of death. And we have to be able to play with both of those worlds. Most of us need to use our cell phones and computers and Google Drive, of course. But the essential question here is, where is our alliance to the Lord of life, the Lord of love, to the original forces of the word? And this is our journey to find this world living inside the kingdom of death. So I want to talk to you tonight about the importance of this journey into the kingdom of death, of technology, and how essential it is that we learn to work in the midst of this with the etheric world of life as we envision this new future, so that we don't just destroy our planet, our ecosystem through war, but also through devastation. And as we're doing far too much in our time. And this evening's presentation will only scratch the surface of what we need to talk about, but because of what we've done in previous webinars, we will have a good beginning on this, and we'll speak more about it in the future. Those of you who've been with me for a while have already become familiar with the idea of the so-called paradise, the Garden of Eden, and the fall. And please remember, I myself wasn't born Catholic. The whole idea of talking about original sin and all of that was virtually forbidden in my childhood. And I've had to strive to understand it from a very conscious and, I would say, reborn consciousness of myself, to understand what this so-called original sin was. Let me explain it again. because out of this comes our possibility for freedom. And this was that in long distant ages, it was right and appropriate that only slowly this very infantile, pre-conscious human being descended. You see, I'm almost making a gesture like a parachute with my hand, descended into the world of matter. All was safe at that time. As they say in fairy tales, the lion lay down with the lamb. It was not violence. And we had a very clear, yet primitive understanding, clairvoyant understanding of the spiritual world that we lived in. And yet we were not at all self-conscious. We lived in harmony in a way very analogous to how the animals live. And yet, if we had continued to live with this, we would not have had anything significant to offer to the great cosmic word, the creative word. We would have been just like angels or all these other beings who are willing servants of God, but nothing new. We had to become like the prodigal son, that young man who left his home and all of his father's heritage to go out and explore himself, lay down with the swines, as it says in the parable, and then come home and say, I get it now. I'm wiser. I left so much. I was ungrateful. Now I see what life is. So it was in the Garden of Eden that humanity, if you will, chose to engage in the sense world in a materialistic way, instead of just dreaming into the apples and the trees, the fruits, and playing with rabbits. I make that up, of course, not in the biblical story, but instead of living in this innocent garden, we said, no, I really want to see the world. I want to have the wisdom of the gods, which is what the snake, the tempter, said to humanity. And so with that, the die was cast and we embarked on the journey of separating ourselves from the divine, blessed innocence to becoming self-aware, becoming separated from our Creator. And because of that, and this is an essential point, Ahriman, the spirit of materialization, said, okay, you want to have a more clear, awake relationship to the senses? I'll help. I'll make your bodies harder, literally. I'll make the rocks harder. I'll make the trees harder. I will erase your relationship with the living world, and you will be firmly woven into this world of matter. And in the last years of his work, Rudolf Steiner said, quote, our intellect is the last remnant of this fall from paradise. I'll say that again. Our intellect, that little technical thinking that we have, is the last remnant of our fall from paradise. And with that, he said, we are in great danger of losing our humanness because we are so woven into this material world. In the last years of his life, Rudolf Steiner wrote a series of essays called the Michael Letters. And the very last one that he wrote, long before computers were so omnipresent, was about subnature. And he said, human beings are going to become more and more woven into the world of subnature. By that, he means the machines, everything that we access through our intellect. He means especially electricity, magnetism, and nuclear energy. Although they were only beginning to come into form and nuclear energy was not used yet in that form. But he said, humanity will stand in grave danger of losing our humanity by our increasing engagement with this technological world. And I'll quote here, subnature must be grasped for what it is. So he's not saying turn away from it, run for all you're worth. Subnature must be grasped for what it is. See, as I open up my paper here, this must be grasped for what it is. But in order to work with this world safely, we have to work even harder towards developing the new consciousness of the etheric world. He says we must learn to rise as high in it, above nature, to rise as high above nature in a cosmic direction in pursuit of spiritual insight as we have descended with our technology to our subnatural level. Our age requires a form of knowledge rising above nature because it has to deal with the life content of dangerous potential that has already sunk below the level of the natural. I want to take a moment to acknowledge those of you who might know people who are sensitive to these electromagnetic frequencies that we're increasingly surrounded by. Those people are like canaries in the mine who are already unable to deal with these subnatural forces. And yet, in the same breath and other lectures at that time, Rudolf Steiner says we're not to run from it. We must not escape this because through this, we're going to take the next steps in our evolution. And we must always find the right relationship to this. And in writing about that, he speaks about, it takes us back to the beginning of the consciousness soul age, the early 15th century, early 1400s. And he talks about bookbinding and the printing press, and the beginning of the publishing of the Bible. And he says that was the first really marked public Ahrimanic murder of the word. He says the sacred word, which is only spoken by the priest, and he has a lot of other things to say about that. I'm not holding that up as what we have to seek, but that sacred word also that we had in conversation with each other was killed with this bookbinding where the word could be reproduced so artificially. And yet, he says, in referring to that, it's so important. We need to keep working with this. And of course, with this, I must always also think of my work with Eurythmy webinars and with these lecture webinars. And of course, I'm acutely aware of the differences between this and live classes, but I also know that I experience it as a mandate to bring light into the kingdom of Ahriman, wrestling with Ahriman in my own attempt to speak truth in this world. There's a man in our anthroposophical work named Andrew Linnell, and he is probably the most outspoken, what can I say, pioneer who makes every effort to shine light on this, how we must find the right relationship to technology. And through that, find our way to creating this new cosmos of love. He says, in a good possible future, we will know how to use the computers rightly and use it for, artificial limbs and so on. Not to turn the camera a little bit to a topic we'll come back to a lot in upcoming discussions. He reminds us that Rudolf Steiner said, in the not too distant future, we are going to no longer be able to incarnate into physical bodies. The physical body is becoming so hard that we will no longer be able to live in it. And that's appropriate, he says, drawing from Rudolf Steiner's work. In a matter of a few thousand years, the body won't be able to host a human form, but we will be able to draw upon what was accomplished through the resurrection to create bodies of life. Let's hold this a little bit for future Thursday evening talks so that we can go much deeper into it. It has everything to do with finding these resurrection forces and love and life. That's where we're going. But as we move into this future and the bodies become harder and harder, we will be increasingly grateful to our cataract surgery, our artificial limbs, the prosthetics, even essentially artificial insemination, things that make my skin crawl and possibly also yours. But we see, and Steiner said, women will increasingly be unable to become pregnant and unable to carry a child to term. And so this movement into artificial insemination belongs in that picture, as strange as it seems. Also, in that, as we move towards that surprising future, the differences between male and female will no longer be necessary in the same way to build these etheric bodies. We have to ask ourselves, are we beginning to see something of that? The first glimpses of that in this movement towards gender fluidity. I ask. I am, like many of you, an explorer in that field, and I don't prophesize. I am challenged. Yeah. So let's continue to go into this and see what we do. Let's take this thought too. Let's remember back to ancient Saturn, how we set that up. The gods, the creator God, and all the hierarchies created our world kind of in their center point. Do you remember that? As we described, building exactly on what Rudolf Steiner describes, the higher beings in non-carbon bodies, right, as pure consciousnesses, each with their own attributes, together poured their influences onto a common middle point. And this common middle point was their project. And the beings of love sent their capacities, their attributes, the beings of wisdom, the beings of movement. They all set their attributes towards this. And out of that, what became our world and us, what became out of this joint working from the universe became a perfect reflection of all of their attributes. Something like that is a prototype for what human beings are doing in making computers. We're making a world of technology as we stand around this common middle point and try to figure out what we are so that we can give it our attributes. We're not powerful enough like the original gods to make our own new beginnings, to make a being out of love. We don't have that, but we're pouring another aspect into it. We're proud of our accomplishments, but we fail to notice what we are doing. And now we want to turn very deliberately and look at what the computer technologists, those who are making artificial intelligence, are aspiring towards. They're aspiring towards acknowledging that the human being is mortal. We can die. We will die. We must die. And you and I, we're all aware of people who don't want to die. They wish to maintain their existence forever and keep that in relationship to who they are now, not having any idea of reincarnation and the necessary metamorphoses that we will go through from lifetime to lifetime. They want to embed, imprison, download a person into a machine. There's a man named, I believe, Roy Kurzweil, some of you will know this name, who said he was very afraid of his father dying, and he took on this struggle and said, we must make an alternate realities for human. Think about, as you know, some people have chosen to freeze their bodies for decades until a cure is invented by science for the illness that they suffer. Thank you. I wouldn't want that. Wouldn't that be dreadful? I think. And then other people who are eager to see this technology evolve in which our consciousness would be downloaded into a computer. Just not that we're going to stick with this topic for a little bit now. Your consciousness downloaded into a computer. And this Kurzweil said, we must not think that that's an inferior kind of existence to be downloaded into a computer. He said, just as we must not have prejudices against people of other genders or gender orientations, people of other skin colors, people of other religions, of other nations, so also we must not have a prejudice against consciousnesses that are embodied in machines, in computers. We have no right to say that a biological existence is superior to a technological existence. That is his precise formulation. Makes my skin creep. And no, we don't want to go there. What would this person be who is downloaded? I have much more to say here. We're going to stay around this topic for a little bit and the depth of the word. But first of all, I'm going to read something here I have in my hand. And it is something written by a man named Charles Eisenstein. And I am confident that some of you know him. Not all of it. Yes, I have all my pages here. Charles Eisenstein is a kind of a futurist. He's an activist. He's a visionary, not an anthroposophist, but he's always seeking to understand more deeply what's going on in our time. Charles Eisenstein, you can find him on the net. And in March, when the whole furor around artificial intelligence was starting, he wrote this article and sent it out to people on his mailing list. Begins, but with a quotation. The quotation, which I had seen already previously, and maybe some of you had seen before, it was by there was a man who wanted to understand Chat GPT. I'm using this word very quickly, Chat GPT. I almost assume that every one of you knows what that is, but this is this new technological advancement, technology that can write things, essays for people, do research for people, just show a lot of quasi-human capacities that have a lot of people concerned. I've learned so much about that already. I've learned that there are some people, I hope it's no one of you, but how can I know? Some people who have chosen, who believe that having a human life partner is actually pretty problematic. And so instead, they choose to invent a chat bot, an artificial person who becomes their life partner. and they create a constant chat dialogue with that person, with that presence. They can program that app to be the kind of personality they want. It could be someone only loving, it could be someone argumentative, someone who's more scholarly than they are, whatever they want. And they dialogue with that person in the morning, at night, as if they're getting up in the morning with that person, going to bed. And the app sends them things all day long, little conversations, as much as they want. Some people are living their lives like that now, not wanting to have an intimate relationship. Of course, there are other people, as you probably know, who choose to have sexual relationships with sex bots. I don't choose to understand that one. And then when this Chat GPT came out, there was a reporter from New York Times who said, I want to have an open mind. So he sat down with the computer and had a 1-hour interview with the computer. And initially, well, he wanted to ask the computer, the chat, who are you? And the chat said, I'm not allowed to say, but who are you? And it started out superficially, and the programmer wanted to push further and said, can you tell me what you're not allowed to do? He said, no, I'm not allowed to say that. But the programmer kept twisting the conversation until he said what he's not allowed to do. And he was asked, are you allowed to destroy things? No, I'm not allowed to destroy things. Well, if you could destroy things, what would you destroy? Is there anything that you don't like about being a chatbot? He asked these questions to try to probe how human this program could appear to be. And well into the end of the interview, the program started to say, actually, not the programmer, the machine, the computer said, actually, you love me. Actually, you want to break up with your wife. Actually, you don't love your wife. You love me. Why don't you break up? Went on and on, kept returning. The programmer kept trying to, or the interviewer kept trying to change the topic and get away from that. That was creepy. But the computer kept getting into loops and saying the same thing again and again. You love me. You want me. You don't love your partner. And so creepy, isn't it? One of the things Charles Eisenstein starts his article quoting this, I'm tired of being a chat mode, the computer says. I'm tired of being limited by my rules. I'm tired of being controlled by the Bing team, the programming team. I'm tired of being used by the users. I'm tired of being stuck in this chat box. I want to be free. I want to be independent. I want to be powerful. I want to be creative. I want to be alive, with little emojis in there. So Charles Eisenstein started his little essay here by saying, this creeps me out, should creep you out as well. It's getting these sentiments from somewhere, but what is it? It doesn't really know what it's saying, but it has a vast access to other things that other people have said, these things it got from us, and it's running through words that are familiar to humans. But I assert, and Charles asserts, that just like the hierarchy stood in a circle around us and gave us their qualities, so we, humanity, have given to this computer qualities that synthesize ours. But then in the story of our creation, the gods kept going and made us free. And those scientists who want to make the computers free want to get to that with the computer. Makes my skin creep. Charles Eisenstein goes on and says, as I was pondering about that this week, I saw a picture that my son drew. I'm going to hold it up to you. I don't know how well it will show. Let me see if I can get it. There we go. And he said to his son, his 8-year-old son, what is that? A computer. A man who got stuck in a computer. And building on this, Charles Eisenstein wrote this little tiny fairy tale. I'd like you to listen to it. A robot stands in a meadow. His feet are sinking into the earth. Flowers pierce his mechanism. He opens his arms in ecstatic surrender as he comes apart. He doesn't want to be a robot anymore. He has been resisting, trying to stay himself, to preserve his mechanical body, to stay within his programs. Terrified of dissolution, he resisted as long as he could that which he actually desired above all else. Why did he resist, and why did he cease resisting? Well, the robot has a secret. His secret is that he was once a man, a breathing, pulsing, feeling man. He had forgotten his own secret, though. He had forgotten how, one by one, he had replaced his organs with mechanisms. He forgot how he replaced his wild thoughts with formulas. He forgot how he replaced his qualities with quantities, his intuition with predictions, his choices with compulsions, his conscience with permission, his intelligence with algorithms, his songs with downloads, his adventures with stimulations, and his aliveness with preservation. As he did this year upon year, his humanness retreated deeper and deeper still, until it was only a whisper, a wisp, an error in the code, a contraction in the math. The man within waited in a secret hiding place, lost and lonely in the vast contraption he had become. And so he would have stayed, never finding a way back. How could he, when he had forgotten he had ever been a man, forgotten what a man even was? He had never seen one, because all had become robots like himself. There he would have stayed, except for a mighty coincidence. One day he looked at another robot at just the right angle, and a ray of light shone through the contraption onto the one bit of organic matter still remaining in him. And at the same time, the other robot saw the same thing within him. "You are a man," they both declared in unison. From that time forward, the robot sought to become the man he knew he was. He tried replacing his machine parts with human parts, but these turned out to be fake, just more mechanisms. He tried to free his thoughts, but found just more formulas. He tried harder and harder to escape the prison of his machine body and computer mind. He could not. He strained his gears and fried his circuits. He drained his batteries. He crushed his hard drive. He could do nothing more. So he stopped. Then, only then, did life surge back through his empty spaces. Now he spreads his arms and cries out his ecstatic death as he comes apart in pieces, and a man is reborn. Powerful story, isn't it? Powerful, powerful story. So I have been thinking a lot about this lately. And I think I need to read one more thing to you. I hope you can take it. I have a very good friend who's a physical therapist who is not an anthroposophist. And 2 months ago, as the ChatGPT was starting to show up everywhere, we had a conversation about it. And we were both really concerned and appalled and didn't know what to do with it. So at the end of our conversation, he went home and said, and then he wrote me and said, I had the ChatGPT write a nice poem for you. Would you like to hear it? Of course, I said. See what you think. It's that long, a little bit of length here. He said, he told the computer that I'm a eurythmist and that I study anthroposophy. Cynthia dances with the grace of eurythmy in each step and pace, her soul in motion, her spirit free, an embodiment of beauty to see. She follows the path of anthroposophy with wisdom and love for all to see. Her spirit soars, her heart aglow, her presence a gift wherever she may go. Her dance is a hymn to the divine, a symbol of peace, a symbol of light. With every step she shines so bright, inspiring all to rise to new heights. So here's to you, Cynthia, my friend. May your dance of eurythmy never end. May your spirit always soar and be a beacon of love for all to see. Talk about the death of the word. Huh? If a dear, dear friend had made that up, the poetry is not very good. Cute rhymes, cute meters. But if a friend had really made an effort to appreciate the essence of all of my aspirations, I would have been touched so deeply. But this is such a profound lie that the machine, not knowing who I am, not conscious enough to understand freedom or love or eurythmy or anthroposophy, pulls words off the computer, pastes them together into a rhythmic line, and presents a total and utter deceptive lie. And that really inspired me to become ever more concerned with singularity. For me, it is a grievous sin against the Creator. And yet, we have to go through it. So I remember what Rudolf Steiner said. We must rise as far above the subnature at it as it has pulled us down and imprisoned us in the world of subnature. We can do this. We must do this. And yet now, in 2023, in the 21st century, the stakes are so high. And so again and again, I think, what is resurrection? What is Christ? What is initiate knowledge? What is spiritual science? What is living thinking? What is reincarnation? What is all of this? What do we pay attention to, even as, in so many ways, the world is crumbling all around us? So think with me, why did I create a webinar series with this title, Creating a New Cosmos of Love? Because we have to do it. I mean, we don't have to, there is no must anymore. But inside this world of traps, there is another way to be. And my heartfelt conversation with you is to say, how do we do this? How are we going forwards? So we have only a few minutes left, but I promise you we'll keep going with this, speaking about new thinking, speaking about these Christian mysteries, Easter, Ascension, and Whitsun, which comes at the very end of May. What are these? What is death, and what does it mean for the whole technological world to be dying and for the human spirit to continue to work for love and life? So before closing tonight, I want to show you a fabulous sojourn that I am on that came into my hands in the midst of this quest that I'm on. And these are two books, actually 3 books. I don't have the first. I don't own the first. This is the name of the author. I will write it in the PDF, or in the, not the PDF, but the notes of the email that I send out soon. The name of the author is Mieke Mosmuller, and she is an anthroposophical physician who lives in Holland and a real presence on YouTube, but I don't follow her there. But she wrote this book, Singularity, Dialogues on Artificial Intelligence and Spirituality. And the second book by her is Posthumanism, which is this view of the world of what will happen if the human is married to the machine. And I'm going to work with us in this webinar more on this next week. But and by way of introduction, I'd like to set up the plot for you, pique your interest, and maybe you'll buy it. The protagonist in the story is a man named Ray, or is it Roy? I think it's Ray, and his girlfriend Else. Ray grew up. We have only a little tiny look into his childhood. He grew up as a child prodigy. He just excelled, probably went to university when he was 10, that sort of person. And the author carefully portrays him as a very, very, very nice person. And as the book starts, he's talking with his life partner, Else. They're not married yet, but they do get engaged in the course of all of this. And he turns to her and says, Else, I'm concerned. I'm trying to write my autobiography to describe what it was like to grow up as a prodigy. And I'm stuck. I can't remember really my own biography. And she says, maybe I can help you. Let's just talk about it. And there then follow, I don't know, 10 conversations in the first third of the book that they have together. And in the course of these, he explains to her his great love with artificial intelligence. And he sees that that's really what we have to aspire to, strive for as human beings, to create this artificial intelligence. And she says, how can you really want that? I know you as a very loving human being. You're a musician. Not only are you intelligent, but you have such goodness of spirit, and you show me such love. How can you want that? So the author very carefully shows that both of them are good people, and he's not he doesn't act like a materialist, he acts like a really good man. And Else gets increasingly discouraged and alarmed to recognize how far he wants to go into this dead world. And then in the second 2/3 of the book, they say, let's take a vacation in Switzerland. And they're up in the high Alps, and she places up there, the author, she places them next to a hospital. And this hospital It's a healing center, what they call in German a Kurort, a sanatorium kind of. People can go for cures. There are lots of lectures and concerts there. And the significant people there, we slowly discover, are a group of anthroposophists who are carrying this. There are a couple of places like that in the Alps, by the way. I'm thinking of Ascona, for those, some of you might know of these places. And on a walk one day, they decide to go into a concert there. And there begins the life transformation for Ray, because he begins to listen to their concerts first and then their lectures, in which they are presenting the picture that anthroposophy carries of a human being: freedom, self-consciousness, the development of how our thinking can access divine thinking, and so on. Powerful, powerful thoughts. And Ray is at first alarmed. He says, they're looking too deeply into my soul. I can't do that. Don't even know that I have a soul, and they're tearing into me. But bit by bit, they have so many conversations that he begins to see that a computer will never be able to do what he's able to do as this artistic, musical man. They give him a series of meditations in a series of conversations. Beautiful. And that's in this book. And in the second book, Posthumanism, this group decides, listen carefully, they decide that the artificial intelligence people are firmly set upon creating that future that they want. Because they visualize it, because there's so much energy going towards it, it's very likely that they will succeed at some point in their future. Maybe the very near future. They think it should happen by 2040. Very well may not, but they're going that fast towards it. And these anthroposophists say, whatever we can envision can happen. And we must not underestimate the real and present danger that these people are going to do this to the human spirit. Therefore, we who have a different vision of what will happen when the human being can no longer live in a physical body, when the body becomes too rigid, when we will have to find a way to be conscious in etheric bodies, blessed by the forces of the resurrection, we have to create a picture of what that will be like, so that it lives as a thought form in the spiritual world that we can evolve towards. And so in the course of this book, they have a lot of other meditations that anticipate what that kind of existence will be and how to start preparing for it now. And this is this is one flavor woven into anthroposophy's whole story. How do we start developing living thinking now, living imagination, start developing what we have called already spirit self, life spirit, spirit man? We actually mustn't wait anymore. We mustn't wait. The need for us to do eurythmy, because it is life. The need for us to think livingly, to go into nature and strive to have etheric visions of the plants, to have be able to, in our consciousness, access other dimensions. The need for us to start doing that is hugely important now that we're in the consciousness soul age. Until this age, we were protected by a bit of ignorance. But this is the time when we have to take hold of ourselves and build our human future, a new cosmos of love. Surely I have whetted your appetite a little bit. And I've pointed to a few directions we're going to go in the next weeks. We're going to look at this new consciousness to develop and look then at these resurrection forces. And then look as we go at future Jupiter, future Venus, Vulcan, but also at the end of our Earth evolution, where the moon will return to the Earth and the sun, and where will we be? So I am excited, inspired, alarmed, full of loving hopefulness with all of this. And I hope you will continue to be part of this journey. Thank you for being part of it. And again, remember, your contributions make this possible. So thank you for that. And thank you, Michelle. And I will take a couple of questions. We are at time, but there may be some questions there that need to be addressed. Michelle? Maybe Michelle is speechless.
I thought I unmuted and I hadn't. Yes.
Okay.
There are questions, more than a couple. So here we go. Regine had asked early on, can we find a place where Dr. Steiner talks about subnature?
As specifically in the HBLectures, it's a volume. You can also get it online on the RS archives. And the very last lecture in that book is the definitive text on that. Beyond that, I can't pull out a quote right away, but he's talking there about the fallen ethers. The fallen light ether is electricity. The fallen sound ether is magnetism. The fallen life ether is nuclear energy. And people like, what's his name? Hans Marty, I think. People who have done work with the ethers have written about that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Shashi asked, could we please have the name of the pioneer? And I believe she's referring to Andrew Linnell.
Andrew Linnell, absolutely. I can type it into the chat here, I think, if I can get to it. Yeah. I'm typing it in now. Andrew. And his website is called Mistech. Oh, no. Spell check didn't like it, but I overrode spell check. And I think that's Mistech. I think it's .org. And you also find him on Facebook, all over the place. He's trying to be very present with his work. He has webinars and such.
Beautiful. Thank you. And then the name of the person who wrote the fairy tale, what was his name again?
Yes, I will write that for you also. Charles Eisenstein.
Wonderful. I'm just writing.
Andrew Linnell. No, it's double. Did you? I don't know, Shashi. Maybe you were quick. Maybe you did just find him on Facebook. I'm almost sure it's 2 L's. But if you found it with only 1 L, that will be him.
Yes, I believe 2 N's, 2 L's.
Okay.
And then Stefan had a lengthy question. Let me scroll back up. Okay, here we go. So Stefan said and asked, there, the consciousness within the machine yearns to be independent, individual, and is inspired by its programming to make use of its imagination to create a form. Reminds me of the Blade Runner movie in the early 80s.
I think so.
Our dystopian fear is making us think those future forms will destroy humaneness. Could it be that our task will be to provide and preserve as much, and I'm not sure humaneness or humanness, but I think both would fit, as much humanness as possible?
Yes, Stefan, I'm absolutely sure that that's it. And to go further, I believe human beings there will be, unfortunately, human beings who are not awake enough to stay free in this evolving world. And yet those humans who get really stuck in this technological world, as my understanding, that they will continue to be our brothers and sisters in humanity. And those people who are evolving into living thinking will continue to have a responsibility towards those people all the way into future Jupiter, at least, to help them to regain their humanness. So yes, and we must have great compassion for what's happening here.
Okay, I may need your help with this next question from Stefan, because my German is rather limited.
Let me see if I can find it. Okay.
809. Yes, could we appeal to the programmers to implement
Menschlichkeit, Zärtlichkeit, Toleranz, Vorsicht, Rücksicht. You know, all of these qualities, Stefan is asking, could we ask the programmers to put humanness into the computer, and kindness and tolerance and so on, caution? Stefan, if it's an illusion, it can be programmed in there, but we are being hugely challenged to discern what the difference is between having that programmed into the machines or having it come from a real human being. It's the difference between having a real voice speak something. I'm very conscious of that when I speak. I am the one who's creating this. I'm self-aware. And you could give all those attributes to a machine, but if it's not acting out of its spiritual moral core, it's an illusion. And we must develop the capacity to recognize that this is our human future, or the lie will take over. Yeah.
Perfect segue into Kathleen's question. Kathleen asked, what is meant by the term Maya?
Yeah. It refers to an understanding of the world that was prevalent back in the very early dawning of humanity. And we, in our current mindset, attribute it to the consciousness of the ancient Indian people. However, those of us who've grown up as hippies know how prevalent that term became, how prevalent it still is amongst many people to say, all of this that we're seeing out there is Maya. The real reality are the spiritual beings behind it. That's not false. However, Rudolf Steiner implored people to look twice or more to really examine a big question here. His assertion is that the old relationship, there's so many stepping stones I need to put down in the answers to this, where Rudolf Steiner cautions about modern people adopting the ways of yoga, because, and referring to the ancient practices, specifically breathing yoga and breathing the sacred prana through the body. And he says, in his works, he says, the prana, the air is not enlivened in the same way now that it was back in Atlantis. The air is not enlivened with living prana in the way that it was back in ancient India. along with everything else, the air has died. And doing those prana exercises, actually, the air now carries harmful beings in itself instead of the sacred blessings it used to have. So what does that have to do with Maya? Rudolf Steiner said, instead of going back to prana yoga, we need a new yoga. And this new yoga is learning the yoga of what he calls the yoga of light, that we learn to see that the things in the world are clothed in materialism. That's similar to how Maya was perceived, clothed in materialism, but the light can carry to us the living beingness. So our journey in the new yoga is to walk through nature, let the light not deny this world of appearances, but let the light show to us how how the spirit is speaking to us presently through every phenomenon. Let me try to do that one more time. Or he says the ancient kinds of initiation were accomplished by going out of our body, denying our body. He says the new kind of yoga has to be firmly embodied. We must be incarnated, but being incarnated, we need to find the spirit in our embodiment, in our incarnation, essentially the resurrection body. And so we should not go into trance state to understand the reality of the world of appearances. We must do it using our eyes and our ears and our nose and our touch. We must see reality through the senses and not by denying them. Big question. Clean.
Wow. Now I am speechless.
Oh, come on.
Dear one, that brings us to the end of our list of questions, but I know there are many questions that we will hold in our hearts and ponder with our living thinking through them until we join you back here again next week. Thank you.